Thanks for joining us again at the Clive Barker Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the works and worlds of Clive Barker. This is episode 150, and boy, do we have a lot of catching up to do. Episode 150 is all about Clive Barker's Next Testament, written by Mark Miller, but we also get into a lot of Hellraiser news, the controversial response to the upcoming release of Nightbreed The Cabal Cut on Blu-Ray, and we even have our first impressions of Hellraiser Anthology Volume II, so please stick with us. And of course, this episode is sponsored by Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination. Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination shop is dedicated to benefiting the Arts and Medicine program at Texas Children's Cancer Center. Up to 50% of the proceeds will support the program where artist Don Bertram volunteers monthly. Please join us in donating to the program at Texas Children's Cancer Center. There's a link in the show notes on the main website at clivebarkercast.com that will take you where you need to go to buy one of his prints or art books. And also this year, his new Christmas cards are coming out. And last year I bought 250 of those, believe it or not. They're great. I highly recommend them. They're cool. Any friend of Clive Barker's is a friend of ours, and we thank Don Bertram for his support. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry about the super long delay. We were on hiatus to try to get some stuff done here, both for the podcast and personal stuff.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, for example, me, I've been working on remodeling a bathroom, and we might be having to move out of Arizona soon for professional reasons. So it's been a little, we got some moving boxes here. We're putting stuff in boxes. We're taking stuff to Goodwill, bringing back stuff from Goodwill. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I got a job, and then I got another job. So I haven't.
At least it paid more.
Yeah. I haven't started work at the new one yet, though. I'm still. Yeah, but I'll be working. I'll be working for the borough, which is kind of like a county, I guess. In a lot of the rest of the country, they're counties, but in Alaska, they're boroughs. So I'll be working for the borough, managing the land that they have for sale, and keeping track of who's paying for their land. And if you're ever squatting on Fairbanks North Star Borough land, I'll be there, and I'll write it down on a clipboard.
You can fight Ryan, but Ryan's going to win.
That's right.
It's like I fought the law and the law won.
Yeah.
So a lot of stuff to go through today, right? We have our episode 150, which is kind of a little landmark for our podcast here.
Yeah, and today we're Jose and me and David is with us.
Hello.
Hey, David. And what have you been up to?
Mainly just work and school.
That's good. So, what are you studying?
Looking at pre-physician assistant.
There we go.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So that's soaking up quite a bit of my time right now, plus regular job as an infection preventionist at the hospital here in town, and so it's just never ending.
I'll bet. Have you guys had time to go see any good movies recently?
We just saw It. That was pretty enjoyable.
Cool. How did you like it?
I liked it quite a bit. Had some logic issues, but all in all, it was very enjoyable.
Awesome. I've heard it made like 50-something million on the opening weekend, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty massive for an R-rated horror film.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of news to go through, so I guess we'll get into those, right?
Yeah, so Rawhead Rex, there's Blu-ray details available now as far as like what's going to be on it and when it's going to be released. So it's a 4K restoration. I think the Blu-ray is just regular 2K 1080p, right?
Well, 2K is one thing, 1080p is half of that. So I guess I'm not super knowledgeable about
I
Blu-ray.
thought 2K and 1080p are the same thing because I just got in a debate with somebody about this and they told me I was wrong and 2K is 1080p.
Technically, no.
Right.
usually when they refer to 2K or 4K, it's the camera negative that they're scanning into digital. So they're trying to maximize the viewing screen so that you can get the best possible image on there. So when they put it out on Blu-ray, they are compressing it down to 1080p. It's just whether it came from a 1080p scan, a 2K scan, or a 4K scan, but you're just basically just trying to get the best possible image. But even then, you still may not get that great of an image, because then it all comes down to what kind of compression technology you're using on the Blu-ray, how much of that space is given to the actual movie and all that stuff.
So, yeah, well, if you have a UHD TV, what's the resolution on that?
It'll still be at 1080p, but usually your UHD player will upscale it. But the 4K, a lot of companies like Arrow and Synapse, they're scanning movies into 4K because they know that's what the technology is going to be, and that's the best way to maximize your picture quality. But you still have to scale it down for a regular Blu-ray.
So UHD TV doesn't do anything really for Blu-rays until there's a new movie format.
Yeah, until you buy like a UHD 4K Blu-ray and have a UHD player, then you'll have, the full thing. Yeah. But most of these Blu-rays, especially from, Kino Lorber and Arrow and Criterion, they're scanning in 4K, but they're not releasing it in 4K because it's still pretty expensive and the market isn't that strong yet for it.
Oh, okay. I had no idea.
But yeah, this Blu-ray it's going to be very interesting for people who love Rawhead Rex, and I know there are a few people out there who really enjoy them. I mean, I remember in the Fifth Dominion Clive Barker fans website, there used to be a guy. You remember that guy, Ryan? His name was Fallon King or something.
Yeah, I actually met him one time.
Oh, really? That's awesome. This guy was the biggest collector of Rawhead Rex stuff that I've ever seen. He had all those little bust kits, and he had them professionally painted and put together. And some of them look really, really nice because you get them professionally in it.
I saw him at Texas Frightmare Weekend, and he had like a life-size, shoulder to head bust of the movie Rawhead Rex that he was bringing with him into the signing.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. Go ahead.
Oh, and I kind of wish that I had been in the same place in line or close so that I could have seen Clive's reaction to that.
Oh, I'll bet it was amazing. Yeah. So yeah, we've been keeping up with the information on the blog, and we've been telling you what the details are going to be, what the extra stuff is going to happen in that disc. And recently, they also decided to release a limited edition poster of it, which you can find it on our latest blog post about Rawhead Rex.
There's an interview with the actor Ronan Wilmot, who played Declan O'Brien. Kill me, I hope.
Is he the deacon?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Wow. They tracked that guy down and did an interview with him. That's amazing.
And I think there's even an interview with the guy that played Rawhead, that deer farmer or whatever.
That's right. The big guy, right? The big Norwegian or whatever he was guy. Now Norwegians are yelling at me like, you got to respect our country.
And an interview with the cameraman. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. It's like, who knew that there was somebody out there that was this big of a fan of Rawhead Rex that they put all this stuff together?
Right.
Tracked all these people down.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for I hate it when movies fall into obscurity because the formats move on and they stay behind.
Yeah.
I mean, I've mentioned this before, and I really hate it when that happens. Like, oh, this movie doesn't exist unless you got a VHS tape or a laser disc or something like that. And it's like, it never made it to DVD. There's a lot of movies that didn't make it to DVD. Those just survive on the internet. Maybe someone scanned a laser disc at some point and put it up on the internet, and But it's great to see even like these old cheesy movies like Rawhead Rex, because hey, it's part of fandom for Clive Barker fans, because we love that story in the Books of Blood. So it's always nice to see it revisited.
And there's audio commentary with George Pavlou.
Yep, that's right. Moderated by Stephen Thrower, the author of Nightmare USA, The Untold Story of the Exploitation, Independence, Murderous Passions, The Delirious Cinema of Jesus Franco, and Beyond Terror, the films of Lucio Fulci. And like you said, an interview with the actor Heinrich von Bunau, who played Rawhead Rex.
Yeah.
I hope I said that right. So a lot of stuff to go through in this, I guess.
Also, the thing that I'm really excited for is the limited slipcase with art from Sean Phillips, who's probably one of my all-time favorite comic book artists.
We
were talking about that before, that art is better than the movie deserves.
Yeah.
it's really good.
And also for people who like DC Comics and especially Swamp Thing, there's also an interview with Stephen R. Bissett, who was co-creator of John Constantine, the character. Mm-hmm. And this is not well known, but before the Eclipse adaptation, the graphic novel adaptation, there was a project for a adaptation by Bissett, and he did a lot of sketches about it. He structured out the facial structure and the bone structure for Rawhead Rex. He was going to have 2 layers of teeth, and some of them would come out and then go back in. And I believe you can only find these images nowadays if you go to a place like comic book collector websites. I think I've seen it. What was the name of that big one? Comic Art Fans, I think. Someone had pictures of those originals, sketches they might have bought at some point from Bissett. And you can see some of the ideas that he had going for the creature. And they kind of mix a little bit the one from the Eclipse novel and the one from the movie, because you see the kind of punkish monster face with like this spiky hair, and then you see these giant teeth that just kind of jut forward from a big, muzzle kind of face. So if you can find that, if I can find it, I'll add it to the show notes. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, in the movie, of course, they didn't give him retractable teeth because that was, I guess, too hard, so they made retractable fingernails instead.
Right.
Which didn't seem to really make any difference. It's like, who cares if you're getting slashed by fingernails that are like now a half-inch longer than they were before?
It was just like cartoon cats when they kind of have the little switchblade sound come out with each claw, you know?
Not quite that good, though.
Right.
Yeah.
But so, yeah. Hey, Fallon King, if you're out there listening to this, I'm sure you're going to buy this. You already probably pre-ordered it. So.
Oh, God, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah,
he would post like tons and tons of pictures of models and all this Rawhead stuff that he had.
Yeah, I was jealous. It was a great collection. It was really amazing.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of Clive Barker fans that are really just Hellraiser fans, but he's the only one that we ever met that was really just in it for the Rawhead Rex for the most part.
You all got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So Marcus has also posted a whole bunch of updates on things that are for sale in the Clive Barker store. There was an Abrad anniversary print. There was some more current original art, like sketches and stuff from Clive that are available to buy, and I think some older sketches too. Like, I think, was it stuff from Weave World or? Trying to remember.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Let me just look it up real quick here.
Yeah, sorry, we're going back in time a little bit here because we haven't done a proper episode in about a month. So.
Yeah, the last post you were talking about was published back in the 16th of last month. So. Yeah, so they got stuff from Imagica, The Great and Secret Show, The Thief of Always. You have some artwork sketches from the time he was writing Weave World. Yeah. And even Next Testament and the Mummy movie, art from that.
And
so
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so it's pretty amazing. You can have concept sketches for Harvey Swick, The Thief of Always. You have a messenger, a piece from the Great and Secret Show that was used as a chapter head for the first part of the novel. And just stuff like that. I mean, Clive's books always had a lot of artful elements to them, especially, books like The Thief of Always, or sometimes it's just a little seashell that he puts on the beginning of a chapter or something. So that comes from somewhere. That's a sketch that he did. So I guess they're selling some of these smaller sketches.
Yeah, which is cool. I imagine a lot of this stuff got unearthed when they moved Clive Barker's office. If anyone's ever visited his office, it's just the sheer amount, the weight of stuff, of sketches, of paintings, of books, manuscripts, all of that stuff they had to move. And anybody that's moved a lot of times knows that you start seeing all your stuff and deciding whether you want to keep it or not. And I suppose Clive Barker's no different,
That's right. I mean, you can go to realclivebarker.com and you can click on the tab that reads original art, and you'll find a list of every single piece that's still available. And like Marcus said in his article, there's some really amazing stuff. There's a particular study of Matter Modley from Abarat that I think it's beautiful, and it costs $500, which I think if you are a Clive Barker art collector, which unfortunately I'm not, but if you are and you have the disposable income for it, these are very attractive. They're the little pieces of his world creation that you can own and put on your wall.
Someday I'd like to have Clive Barker art.
Yeah, same here.
Well, you already have Clive Barker art, Ryan. Yeah, you have like a little drawing of Joey while he was still in the womb.
Oh, well, yes, that's true.
So that counts.
Yeah.
Not many people can say that Clive Barker sketched their son before he was born.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. No, I was thinking about paintings.
That's right.
When I was over there, the first time, there was a tent set up in his backyard, and it was all just paintings that were rejected.
Wow, yeah. He would sometimes scrape them off and start again.
Yeah, and I was looking at those going, man, anybody, any Clive Barker fan would love to have these, and one rainstorm could just destroy all of this stuff.
Yeah, I guess it was L.A. They were facing a drought for years, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so that was like 2011, I guess.
Yeah, and there were a couple of sculptures released at the Clive Barker store as well. They weren't released; they were teased, and so these were a little bust of Decker from Nightbreed and another one of our favorite Hell Priest, Pinhead. So they teased these back about 3 weeks ago, and so I'm wondering what are these things going to be about and how much they're going to cost. We don't have the information yet, but we'll keep you guys posted.
Yeah, and Lord of Illusions turned 22 years old. I can't remember what date that was anymore now, but that was one of our news stories a while back. I guess I could find that on the calendar here. The 25th of August it was. Lord of Illusions was released in 1995 on August 25th.
I wrote a little blurb to celebrate it, and it's a great movie. Finally out in Blu-ray by Shout, which I totally recommend. It's a great release.
We had been debating whether we wanted to turn Occupy Midian towards demanding a Blu-ray release of Lord of Illusions, and then it happened while we were still talking about it.
I want a Blu-ray release of Transmutations.
I think they should have. I think it was a mistake. They should have just thrown it in with Rawhead Rex, because I don't know how many people would buy that on its own. But with Rawhead Rex, it's a good sort of historical piece. Yeah.
It was kind of like Nightbreed before Nightbreed. It was monsters versus mobsters. So I was just making a joke, but about Lord of Illusions. But about Lord of Illusions, though, I just want to add a little thing is that once we start going back into the blog, into the CliveBarkerCast.com blog, and we go back and we start looking at topics, and sometimes when I'm making an article about a movie or something we've reviewed in the past, I try to make an effort to go back and link to previous posts where it surfaced in our website. And so it's just becoming astounding to me how much content there is about certain things that we've talked about. And I did that for Lord of Illusions. So, we started out talking about it on episode 13 and then 87. We talked about that script for the Damour's first adventure, The Great Unknown. Rob made a feature about Lord of Illusion's movie locations, which are not hard to find because basically it's all around LA, so all these places are well known. But and even our reviews of the Shout Factory release in December 14 of last year. So it's always nice to go back and see all the content that we created, and I hope people are using our commentary track. I mean, we did the best job we could with those.
Yeah, they were fun to do.
So go back and check that out.
Tonight again, if anybody remembers, we sort of teased that we got to hear an early version of that audiobook. But now it's been released. So you can go find that wherever you get your audiobooks, Audible or iTunes. I'm sure there are other places too. Yeah,
it's a wonderful book. It's a wonderful book. Like I say, I'm sorry that even the non-limited version is limited to 1,000 copies. But if you can find a copy of this, I really recommend it. I love the material that they selected for this. It's beautiful.
Well, the audiobook's not limited, at least. And it's read by Doug Bradley, which is super cool. Really good. If you've heard Mr. Begone, narrated by Doug Bradley, then you'll know that it's going to be really good.
It's a wonderful little book, and we had a chance to help Seraphin with some feedback, and we listened to a few alternate takes of it at the time.
Yeah.
And they're great. I mean, Doug does voices. At first, I thought it was going to be a little strange to listen to Doug Bradley go on about sexual kinks and fetishes, especially when he's talking as a character who's female. But then you just kind of go into it, and he just does such a great performance, including making some different accents and kind of scruffy voices. And I'm sure that Scruffy, the janitor from Futurama, makes an appearance in one of these stories. The way that Doug Bradley talks, especially that story about not two dogs, a man and his dog. They're looking through a window at a woman,
right,
having a sexual encounter, and he does really funny voices. So funny but good, good performances. I mean, it really kind of helps crystallize in your head that you're listening to two different characters being represented by the same voice, which sometimes can be confusing in an audiobook, but with Doug's performance, I think it's pretty clear. And so it's a wonderful little, series of vignettes.
And now, less than a year from the Hellraiser Scarlet box, Arrow's released another Hellraiser box set. It's a steelbook for, I guess, in honor of the anniversary, which as we're recording this is tomorrow, right? It's the 11th of September is the 30th anniversary of Hellraiser.
Wow, isn't that amazing? It's been 30 years.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. Have you ever covered a Hellraiser in Cinema Bluster, David?
Not with Cinema Bluster, but we have with Horror Underground, my previous site. But on our podcast, one of the things that we keep wanting to do is go through the Scarlet box, but we haven't gotten around to it yet.
We're doing the same thing here, yeah.
It's
sitting on my shelf in my to watch pile, but it's like we talk about Hellraiser so much that it's like
sorry.
Yeah. Like
I just visited that movie so many times. At some point it's just like I could watch it again, but it's like oh my god, I already know the entire movie.
And it feels a little bit like I'm on a break from the podcast right now. I'm going to watch Pacific Rim again or something.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, the transfers are gorgeous, and it's really part 3 that has the best of the transfers because all the previous ones were, not that good. But it's a lot of material to go through.
I had heard that you can see the mechanics behind the statue when it's pulling the skin off of that woman, like whatever's pulling the chains and stuff.
Yeah, you can see some wire work and some other stuff on there.
because I guess it was mainly people were used to seeing it in full frame and not in widescreen.
Yeah.
And now being in high definition probably doesn't help either.
Yeah.
So,
But it's weird that Arrow is that they've essentially already triple dipped into Hellraiser in like the span of a year.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because they had the first they had the British Scarlet Box, then they had the American Scarlet Box. Now they have this one, but the thing is, we're announcing this one, it's already sold out.
Yeah.
It was.
And then in the UK, they also did all 3 films individually on Blu-ray.
Yeah, right,
Oh,
right.
okay.
Yes, for people that missed out on the Scarlet Box.
Yeah.
And then we just saw it popped up on Amazon that the U.S. release is going to be coming out on the 31st of October, so on Halloween.
So I'm wondering how limited this is going to be, because it seems like the UK one had to have been pretty limited. I mean, that sold out within a matter of a couple of days.
Do any of you guys collect steelbooks?
I do, yeah.
I have a few, but I don't particularly collect them. So I may have like a dozen, maybe 10 of those.
I always just like to have, whatever is the most comprehensive, best version of a movie, and then I get rid of the rest of them, unless they're autographed, and then they're kind of like an anchor that it's like, oh, I can't get rid of that. So I have like 5 copies of Hellraiser.
So I think this edition, which is already sold out in Britain, but it's going to come out on October 31st here in America. So the special edition, I'm looking at the contents, and I think a lot of this is the same stuff that came out in the Scarlet Box, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like it's the exact same thing as the first disc on Scarlet Box.
But it's got a steel case, so you could run it over with your car, and it would still be okay.
Actually, steelbooks are so fragile sometimes, especially the printing on them.
They're pretty flimsy.
Yeah, and the printing on it.
I don't think I've ever owned one. I have the tin box of Hellraiser on DVD.
Right. It's just that sometimes the print on the tin, on the steel book that they call it, it can just get scratched so easily. And
the artwork scratches off?
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of them have like foil and other stuff kind of mixed into them, so they're pretty delicate, especially synapses. I touch those very gingerly.
They should put a cardboard sleeve around the outside.
Yeah, that would be great.
So this has been repackaged with some Mondo artwork by Matt Ryan Tobin, which I like that a lot. I mean, they're also doing a poster of this, I think. And
it's a really cool it's a really cool artwork. If you look at that and not knowing anything about this steelbook, you would think there was a new Hellraiser movie coming out. Because it looks like sort of updated Hellraiser artwork for some kind of a new release.
Yep. That's what they call perceived value. When you're trying to triple dip into something, you just want to make it that little bit more attractive to justify it. So
I think this is cool, and I'm happy that Hellraiser is so popular enough to warrant something like this, but I'm probably not going to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, this is something for collectors. If you're into collecting Hellraiser, I think you have to get this one because of the repackaging. But if you already have the Scarlet Box, I don't know. It's up to you. If you can afford it, then go ahead, go nuts. Buy Hellraiser 300 times.
And the other thing too is I'm really surprised that the Scarlet Box US version hasn't sold out yet. Because the UK version sold out really quickly, and there's still copies of the Scarlet Box available.
Oh, man.
They just sold some on sale through Diabolic DVD when they had their Arrow sale 2 weeks ago. So just thought that was interesting. I don't know if it's actually limited then or not.
I hope it's because it's not limited, because we don't want the message to go out to Arrow that, we can't make any money in the United States.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they'll do fine. I mean, Hellraiser is a hot commodity. Everybody wants to buy a copy of it. And especially this edition is like the Scarlet Box is like the definitive edition. Yeah. It's going to stay that way for a while. But then again, what do I know? Maybe in like 5 years, someone's going to come up with new commentary tracks and new never before seen footage from the cutting room floor or something. At this point, anything can happen. I've seen this happen with so many movies.
Yeah.
But I think we're safe for saying that the Scarlet Box is going to be the definitive set for a long time.
I'm sure I'll probably never go back to actually watching the 2 Laserdisc versions that I have.
You got the one that came with the script, the paperback script.
Yeah, and the bare bones one that was before that was in pan and scan.
Right.
Yeah, and it has the pictures of the Laserdisc on the side because they just use the VHS cover on the.
Mm-hmm.
So they fill the rest of the image with pictures of an actual Laserdisc.
And the infamous surgeon picture, which actually they found.
No, that's
they put
Hellbound.
Yeah. So there's a lot of celebrations for Hellraiser 30th anniversary that are going to start really, really soon because, like you said, it's tomorrow, I think.
Yeah.
But there's going to be some really awesome screenings, both in America and in the UK, I think. 25th of September at the Prince Charles Cinema, they're going to the first theater that played the very first screening of Hellraiser 30 years ago is doing an amazing screening of Hellraiser, and it's going to have some copies of this Arrow Steelbook thing for sale, or at least the poster is going to be available to buy. So
that would be cool.
That's right. And there's going to be Chris Young, if you're into his soundtracks. And I know a lot of Hellraiser fans think that the soundtrack is amazing, and that's what adds so much to the movie. But Chris Young, the composer, he's going to be signing copies of the Lakeshore Records Hellraiser vinyl soundtrack, special 30th anniversary edition, remixed and remastered from the original 24-track master tapes at Dark Delicacies, Delhausen's bookstore in Burbank, on the 15th of October. So go to that website for Dark Delicacies and look it up. It's going to be a cool event, I'm sure. I wish I could attend.
So the Leviathan book is starting to appear, right, in people's homes here in the U.S. I think, David, you got one already, but Jose, yours didn't arrive yet?
Yeah.
Right. Mine hasn't arrived yet. But this time I put the right address because I know I have a history of sometimes PayPal screwing up. And, what was the book that happened that? The Last Illusion. Right.
Yeah, The Last Illusion from Fiddle Black.
Fiddle Black. Yeah, I paid it on PayPal, and then I didn't look at it for a while, and then I was wondering, it's taken a long time for the book to arrive, and I realized, I hadn't used PayPal in months before I moved to a different house in Arizona, and I forgot to change the address, so it went to some tenants that were living in the house that I was living a few months ago. So I had to, Actually, it went to California. I'm sorry. It went to the address in California.
And then also you had some issue like that with Century Guild too.
Yeah,
they
that's
sent
true.
Stuff to the wrong address.
Yeah, but things work out. Fiddle Black sent me another copy of the book, so that was.
Yeah.
But this time I made sure. It's just that it hasn't arrived yet. I'm sure I'll get it maybe Monday or Tuesday. I'll probably have my hands on the beautiful Leviathan book.
It's quite nice too.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's essentially, I'm gonna throw out my nerd card here for a second, but it's basically like one of the more modern Dungeons and Dragons books as far as size and weight and binding and everything.
So it's heavy cover and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the book itself weighs a considerable amount. And then on the inside of it, there's a sticker with the number edition that you received out of, the 1,000 copies.
Wow.
Sweet. I was looking at the specs for it. I'm really excited about getting my copy. It's got 230 full color pages. It's got hundreds of behind the scenes photos from Hellraiser. And, they put a lot of stuff into the 11 hours of the original documentary package, but there's always all these pictures that they can just put in the book. So, it's got an afterword by Paul Kane, who we've had on the podcast. It's got that beautiful cover art by Graham Humphreys. And it's not the first time that Cult Screenings has done books like this. They've done books like this for other documentaries that they've done. So, it's really awesome. I'm waiting for my copy. And as soon as we get it, we're probably going to do an episode about it, right?
Yeah. You send things to the wrong address. My issue is I accidentally buy books twice. I buy it once when it's announced, and then the second time, a year and a half later, when they're like, hey, these things are starting to arrive, and I go, I can't remember if I ordered that, and I buy it again.
And that's the story of how I got my copy of Next Testament.
Right.
So also stuff sometimes takes a while to get to you, right? In Alaska, sometimes mail has to be put in a barge, and that takes a little while.
Well, and some of the companies don't give you a choice. They send it media mail, and I just wish I could just upgrade it to, first class or something, because media mail goes down to Federal Way, Washington, and sits on a barge until the barge fills up with mail, and then they start coming up here. So it's like 3 to 8 weeks.
That's what you get for living the pioneer life in the frontier land.
Yeah, well, I complained to one of these companies about that, and they're like, "Oh, well, just let us know if you want a review copy next time." It's like, "Oh, yeah, I think I've talked to you about that before."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just going back to the Leviathan book, and I'm sure, David, you'll have a lot of stuff to talk about that when we talk about it after we've all read it. But yeah, so this is 1,000 copies. I don't know if it's sold out yet. I hope people out there can still get a copy of this. But if you want to buy a copy of this, just go to cultscreenings.co.uk/Leviathan-book. And I think you can get it from there. So look up the Leviathan documentary website, and I'm sure you'll be able to get your copy.
Yeah, that sounds really cool.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you missed out on the documentary, or you don't want to sit through the 11 hours.
Right.
It's basically like a crash course in the Leviathan documentary.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff there.
And
so,
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, and speaking of Hellraiser news, there is a Monster Mania Hellraiser reunion again. I went to one in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, in 2012, which was, I was there to sort of in support of Occupy Midian and stuff, but and for our podcast. But this one is not in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It's in Maryland, Hunt Valley, Maryland.
Yeah, it's going to be September 29th to October 1st at the 2017 Delta Hotel Marriott in Hunt Valley, Maryland.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a big Hellraiser reunion here.
So is Monster Mania like Mad Monster Party, where they have them in more than one location, or do you think they just moved?
I think they have them in more than one location, yeah. I guess it depends on where they can organize it. Never having been involved with any of these events, I mean, I don't know.
I know Mad Monster Party have the one in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then they had another one in Arizona that you were debating going to.
Well, I will tell you that Monster Mania, the tagline on the website says the semi-annual Philadelphia horror film and memorabilia convention.
Oh, okay.
So, and they've done the last couple of those in Cherry Hill, but this one is in Hunt Valley, Maryland. So they've gone to New Jersey to Maryland, and they're a Philadelphia horror film convention. So I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it seems like Cherry Hill, New Jersey's kind of far from there, but
right. But hey, Ric Flair is coming to Monster Mania 38. He was almost dead not too long ago, and he's bounced back. So here's to all the WWE fans out there.
I was going to say, who is that? I don't know.
Oh, you don't know who Ric Flair is?
No.
Okay, I guess you're not a WWE fan then.
No, when I was young, my parents made fun of wrestling and told me how fake it was, and then I was noticing that all the other kids, this was WWF, but like all the other kids, believed it. They would talk about it like it was real, and did you see what this guy did to that guy and whatever.
Oh yeah.
I would say it was fake, and they would get angry with me.
And... Sure. It's still real to me, damn it.
Lately, WWE, like classic WWE wrestlers, have been making tons of appearances at horror conventions lately. I don't know what the connection is, but it seems to be doing well.
Yeah, it's kind of like Comic-Con. Like, right, it's just like anything that anybody likes is fair game.
Yeah.
I guess, even if you don't know WWE, I'm sure you've heard of Hulk Hogan, right?
Yes.
So Ric Flair was just as big as Hulk Hogan, I guess. It was like a nemesis. Yeah.
Must have been later on than Hulk Hogan.
That was around the same time.
Yeah, around the same time.
Oh.
So, but yeah, there's going to be a big Hellraiser reunion there, I think. And yeah, I got it from, I think it was Simon Banford that posted it, and I shared it onto our Facebook page. So
that's cool.
Stay tuned for that.
So our big news, which I'm getting a little tired of hearing about, is the Nightbreed Cabal Cut. We've got release details. It's going to be coming out sometime by the end of this month, being September 2017. We'll know more in a few days when they arrive at Seraphim. There are 200 copies for $250 of the deluxe set that has a lot of extras, and 50 copies that are $75 of the more bare bones set. And for people out there that got confused, it does have a case. It's not just a disc that's getting shoved in an envelope. I couldn't believe how many people thought that that's what that meant.
It's not like something written with a Sharpie. Cabal Cut. There. Stick it in an envelope.
Wrapped in saran wrap.
Yeah. Hey, if it was handwritten by Clive Barker with a Sharpie, that might be, valuable.
Yeah, that would be legit.
I said it was
make a little drawing on the disc.
The Blu-ray tray case or something, and people are like, "Oh, and it doesn't even have a Blu-ray case? Thanks a lot, jerks," or whatever. And they're like, "Okay." So I switched the language in there, and I said like cardboard sleeve.
Uh-huh.
So I'm hoping that will settle it. Yes, it has an actual case. It has a cover. It just doesn't have the cardboard sleeve that's signed and numbered, and it doesn't have all the other cool extra stuff.
Yeah, and that slipcase is awesome. That looks fantastic.
Oh yeah, the Daniel Serra art, right?
Yeah, I think that's what I want the most.
Yeah, well, and there's even a poster of that comes with it too.
Yeah,
it's gorgeous. Yeah, and I posted a picture of from Daniel Serra's Facebook. He was posting the other day a detail of the painting that he did for the poster, so I shared that on the blog.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the package. It just looks amazing. And it's got a Decker enamel pin badge that you also get with the package. You got a 10 postcard set, which I think this will be either production photos or screenshots of the movie, but I don't think it'll be screenshots of the movie. This is probably like, I don't know. Did we get information about what these pictures are going to be like, Ryan?
Oh, those little
I don't
cards.
think so, right?
Yeah, I don't know anything about those other than what we can see in the picture there.
Right. So I think they'll just be either like production photos or some screenshots of pivotal moments in the film or something like that.
Yeah.
But you will also be able to get the 11 by 17 inch poster with Ralph McQuarrie, which involves some of the teaser art that has been rendered in beautiful color. And you also have a little vinyl sticker if you're into that.
Yeah, and we didn't really talk much about this before, but they it took a little bit, but they got the rights to use the image that used to be on the Making of Hellraiser book that was only available in the UK. They tracked down the artist, and they were able to get permission to put that on the main cover of the Blu-ray.
I always loved that picture, and for the longest time, some people thought it was the same artist that did the British Cabal paperback cover, Les Edwards. But then Seraphim discovered that it was actually an artist called Tim White. He did the artwork for this. So that's great that they're bringing back this artwork because it deserves to be brought back. It's a really striking piece with like the face of Cabal over the gates of Midian. And maybe some people out there who've never had a copy of this book, it's a Fontana book from 1990, they'll be seeing this for the first time. So that's great.
And I wanted to kind of get into the reaction a little bit that we've had on this. I think the main issues that we're having here is that the people in the UK sort of see this as an attempt to fill the void because they didn't get a release of the director's cut in their region, and it's like, oh, now we can finally get one of these, and there's only 200 of them, and it's $250. So that is sort of really, I think the way they should be seeing this is it's kind of a special edition boutique sort of a release, and this is not meant to fill that gap.
Yeah, and I think that the price point is clear enough to show that this is really for the big fans.
Yeah.
For the collectors. It's not a wide release in any way, and it's definitely not priced for that. It's for people that really want to see this specific cut.
Yeah, and it's also not meant to replace the director's cut. That was another piece of feedback that we were getting. It's like, well, I thought that the director's cut was the final one, and now we got this other one, and they're triple dipping or whatever, and it's like, no, it's a different cut of the movie, and it's to sort of celebrate that Occupy Midian moment in time. And they were lucky that Morgan Creek even let them do this at all, because they're still trying to sell the director's cut.
Yeah.
And another thing it celebrates, I think, in my opinion, is that it celebrates the Cabal Cut, which was a great stepping stone in the process. And I think a lot of people out there always, clamor that, hey, we should get the Cabal Cut as an extra in like the Shout Factory release. And unfortunately, it didn't happen because the one that most people saw, like 25,000 fans around the world, was not very good quality. And a lot of people would be okay with that, but I think the thing that they did for this new release that's coming out of the Cabal Cut is that they actually went back, they got the footage that they were given by Morgan Creek, and they went through the Cabal Cut, one of the versions of the Cabal Cut, and they started cutting in the good footage into it instead of just using the VHS work print one, because I've seen the work prints, I've seen bits of them, and I've seen the quality that they had. And one of them was a good scan, I guess, but it had like a big watermark on the top, says Nightbreed, copyright 1989. So it's kind of hard to take that out. They just put like a black bar on top of that part. But the other work print was really rough, and it was basically someone was screening the movie onto a small projected screen, and then someone set up a camera recording that screen at a slight angle, and that's one of the work prints. Someone just did that as a quick kind of way to get that cut into a VHS that they could give to someone to screen.
Right. Yeah, and for the producers or something.
And that one gets really muddy. I mean, that one really gets muddy, and it's a low grade quality, and it gets out of focus at some point. So, it was good that they went back and they replaced as much of this footage, grainy VHS footage, with the good footage that they were given.
Yeah.
So there's still about 12 minutes of the VHS work print footage into this cut because they couldn't get that stuff anywhere else. That was not in the 600 boxes of material that they found in like a vault.
And you do notice it, but it's not like 12 minutes all contiguous. It's just a scene here and there every once in a while.
Right. I mean, I'm sure people like, David, you've always been into cinema, so I'm sure at some point you were one of the people who saw that bootleg edition of the Halloween 6 producer's cut, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like it kind of jumped around from DVD or Blu-ray to like VHS work print. And for some people that was kind of jarring, but I never had a hard time with it just because of the way that it was cut so well, to the frame. It's like you'd be looking at Paul Rudd and then the quality would just degrade a little bit, but it was like almost imperceptible change into VHS footage. But
yeah, and people also have to have the understanding of work prints weren't meant to look good. It was just something that the directors and the editors and producers were using as an assembly, and not every work print out there is going to be treated like Blade Runner and get a 4K restoration.
Yeah. I still remember, now that you mention it, I still remember when one of those screenings of what was called at the time the work print edition of Blade Runner was available to download. It was just someone who had filmed the screen from their seat.
Yeah.
And and nowadays, of course, there's that big set that has like 4 or 5 versions of the movie.
I still haven't watched every one of those yet.
Right.
I mean, I have them, but
yeah.
It's actually quite good. I definitely recommend it. Not in one sitting, but over the span of 1 a week. It's interesting to see how the story kind of shifts back and forth on those.
I kind of more grew up with the first one before the director's cut, and then when the 92 I think director's cut came out, I didn't really like it as much.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's another director's cut. It's like, this one's the real director's cut.
Yeah, the final cut that he did.
Yeah.
That was great. I don't know if it already passed. I think it did, but I think maybe like a few days ago, the Alamo Drafthouse Cinemas were playing a one-time 4K screening of the final cut in their cinemas. So I kind of missed that one. But, yeah, that was good. That was a good cut to screen. But going back to this Cabal cut, I just want to go real quick over some of the backlash that some people have had about it. And I just want to focus more on the positives, of course. But it's like, look, I get it. Some people are a little upset at the price or whatever, but you have to understand that, first of all, the low number is Seraphin doesn't own the movie. Morgan Creek does. And Warner has the rights to the distribution through their, Warner burn on demand home video system. And it's just the way the cards are dealt. The Clive Barker people talked to them and they said, well, sure, you can do a small run of it. You can do 250. And that's what they had to work with. So you have to think that this is kind of an author's edition, all right, of this cut. So if they could have done more copies, a wider number, they could have diluted the cost of the Blu-ray. But, since that didn't happen, it's just what you have to deal with,
Well, and another misconception that we're getting a lot in the comments is people are like, oh, I thought that the director's cut was the one that Clive Barker liked, and now they're making this other one? Well, which one? Yeah, I bet Clive Barker doesn't even know about this. Like, they made it in his house.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw some of those people who were, like, very, very outraged, and they were saying that this was a cash grab and this and that. And it's like, look, it's not. I mean, you just have to think that at this point, Clive Barker is kind of he's more into the independent publishing circuit now. He doesn't have the support of like a giant publisher like HarperCollins that could flood the market with, tens of thousands of paperbacks or mass market paperbacks. That doesn't happen anymore. Yeah. And Clive is more into the low, independent publisher, small scale kind of thing.
Yeah.
You have to see Clive as an artist in the same vein as like David Lynch, and these things come out and they're very limited because these are done in-house, right? Like you were saying.
And maybe someday Shout Factory might repackage all of it together, but not right now.
Yeah. Someone was commenting on Facebook that it's like, well, he's just as big as Stephen King, and I can't believe that we're getting these small like editions. And it's like, yeah, but Stephen King, you're talking about different artists with different bodies of work and different ways of working. And it's great that Stephen King is so mainstream right now. It's got It, and I'm sure it's making a ton of money. It made like $51 million in the opening weekend. But it's great. But it's like Clive hasn't been that mainstream in a while. And I'm sorry if this shocks people, but that's the truth. Clive hasn't been that mainstream as King has. Yeah. So you can't really compare it.
Case in point for that, like with Chicago Days of the Dead happening, and you have so many of the cast members coming to that, and they're not even the main feature of the people that are coming there. I mean, Sean Astin and a couple others are getting the main billing for that event, and you have almost a complete reunion of Hellraiser happening there. So clearly Clive isn't as big as someone like Stephen King. And the other thing too is that, with people, all the complaints about this being a cash grab, people need to understand that this isn't really priced for that. I mean, it's expensive, but they're only going to make about $54,000, and that's not a lot considering what they had to go through to have somebody assemble this, put it together, press the Blu-rays, get the packages, get the posters, the postcards, the pins, and everything made. This isn't set at a price point to make a lot of money.
Well, and I don't know if we can say how much of the money Morgan Creek gets, but they get a huge percentage of the, and they're not they're not paying for any of the expenses.
Yeah. Right. And King has It, and he has The Dark Tower that just came out. It's just different. It doesn't mean it's better or worse, or that Clive Barker, they're saying Clive Barker isn't as big as Stephen King. Well, it's a fact. I'm sorry. It's just, it's more mainstream, which is okay. There's a lot of pop art out there, and I don't want to say Stephen King is pop. Jesus Christ, don't get me wrong, but it's like there's a lot of pop art out there. Just because it's pop doesn't mean it's bad. it just means it's more popular, that more people identify it.
Stephen King is popular. I mean, if your books get sold in the airport bookstore, then I think you're a popular author.
Yeah. I guess that's a good gauge. I guess.
If you can have the kind of ending that the book It has and not get lambasted like someone like Edward Lee or some of the other splatterpunk and splatterspunk horror authors, right. You're obviously huge.
Yeah.
Actually, it's funny. The other just today, I think I read in the morning. I was going through news and I saw Stephen King replied to the people who were writing articles about that last scene in the book of It. About the big, I don't want to spoil it, but there's the kids kind of do this thing where it's very sexual in nature. But he said, well, people get hung up on that scene, but they don't get hung up on all the kid murders throughout the book. And I think that's kind of weird, So, it's just as an aside I wanted to say. But Clive's work is just, it's look, he puts his blood, sweat, and tears and paint and semen into it. He puts a lot of himself into the effort of making art. And Clive Barker, he's put in a lot of effort into all of this stuff. And he's fought depression for like 20 years. He has health issues. He's had strokes. He's had low points. He has had heartbreaks. And it's just nice to see these things work out for him right now. And I'm happy as a fan to see that these things are coming out and people are being given a chance to have these things put out in the world. Yeah. It's like, I know a lot of fans would love to have, like we were talking earlier, I would love to have a painting by Clive Barker in my wall. I just know it's going to take a while for me to be able to afford it. Yeah. And I can't own everything that comes out from Clive Barker. And I've told you this before. Sometimes we were talking about, are we going to review this book or are we going to review that? And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to get that. I can't really afford that right now.
Yeah, it's the same.
It happens. So
we've had to divide things up too. I mean, except that I accidentally bought 2 copies of Next Testament. Otherwise, you would have had the Leviathan book, and I would have had the Next Testament.
Right. So, anyway, that's the trick of being close to and appreciating someone's art life. To borrow an expression from the Lynch world, is that you have to take them in and their beautiful idiosyncrasies, sometimes imperfections. Halo and sweat alike. You know what I'm saying? That's a trick of liking the art and liking the artist, is you have to take them in at the work that they do, and you connect to it or not. That's just the way things are.
Well, and Clive Barker, his output has slowed down, and I think that's the main, because we are talking about a movie from 1990. I think that the main thing that's caused his sort of slow down is the even like if you look at Abarat, other authors that put out a series like that, a series of books, will typically come out with a book every year, every couple of years in a series until it's done. And with Abarat, it'll be 5 years between one set and 7 between another. What was it? 2000. Was
2002, and then it was 2004, right?
Yeah.
And then it was like 2012.
Yeah, right. And then 2012, and it's 2017, and we don't have Abarat 4 yet. So that's it's been 5 years now.
Yeah, well, if he stops rewriting the book every once in a while.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes he throws in he'll throw a draft right in the garbage and start over again.
Yeah, well, because. Like he said once in the extra content, I think it might have been for Book of Blood or it was the Midnight Meat Train, there was this behind-the-scenes feature where he was painting and he was saying, as a gay man, I don't have kids. These paintings and my books are my kids, and it's you have to put in the time and the effort to make sure you're I'm just paraphrasing here, but he said you have to put in the time and effort to make sure it comes out right and the way you want it, and sometimes it just takes time. So yeah, not everyone can pump out a 700-page book every 8 months.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there's people who can do it. Wonderful. I was just at the Goodwill yesterday, and I was looking at an entire shelf of Anne Rice books, and I'm like, wow, if I was an Anne Rice fan, I would make a killing here in this shelf at Goodwill for like $10. I would buy all these books. Have you
ever been at a bookstore and you're in the horror section and you're like, trying to find Clive Barker, but they're alphabetical, and it's like V.C. Andrews for 3 rows or whatever, for 3 shelves.
Clive Cussler, yeah. So many Clive Cussler books that I've looked at looking for
horror section.
I know. But, so yeah, you know, it's just the way it is. And one day it's going to come sometime soon. I don't know if this will happen to Clive, to be honest. I mean, I think he should deserve a break at some point, like retirement. But I think he's going to be one of those people who's just going to continue working until he falls over, you know?
Yeah.
That's what Clive's going to be doing. Probably the last day, Clive will be drawing something, and that's going to be it. And we have to treasure these things while they're still here. You know, you can't take these things for granted. Every piece of artwork that comes out of Clive Barker's desk, for me, that's another piece of art making the world more beautiful. That's what I think the trick of art is.
Yeah.
You know?
And this limited edition is not meant to be like, okay, here's the new version of Nightbreed. It's not really like that. This is a celebration of a moment in time, of a movement, and the Cabal Cut that Russell and Jimmy put together. It's a limited release. It's the best that they could do. You know, as far as both the amount available and the price.
I know. So not everyone's going to be able to get a copy, and that's kind of sad for the people who can't get it. But it's just the way it is.
The other thing that people are concerned about is, and maybe rightfully, is that they'll get on the website and it'll be gone before they get there. But what we've been hearing is that typically stuff like this, everybody thinks that's going to happen, but it ends up being like a couple of days or a week before it sells out.
Also, there's going to be people who are going to watch it and they're going to put it back on sale, used. And don't discount the used market. I mean, that's definitely a possibility in the future. I mean, I'm sure
going to be scalpers selling it for $1,000 or
whatever. I hope not. I mean, I hope not. But you know, it may happen. But I hope not. And it's the good thing about it is you want this cut to be made and put out there. And then maybe in a few years or something, Arrow will be able to put it out, you know, as a release, a wider thing. If not Arrow, someone else. I'm just saying Arrow because we were talking about Arrow earlier. But
and also
what's important is that the work is done.
Shout Factory doesn't seem to want to put out or anything that's not Region 1 or A,
mm-hmm.
you know. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, because they're an American company, right? So they, by law, they have to do that. So anyway, so that's a package, and it's going to be cool, and it's going to be great for everybody who wants to experience the Cabal Cut, whether you've seen it before or not. I'm sure you have a good time. It's going to have a commentary track by Ryan and myself, another one with Russell Charrington and Jimmy Johnson, and we'll be sure to review it for everybody who wants to listen to us rambling about it as a couple of weeks. So.
So, moving on to also speaking of independent Seraphim releases, you know, by Clive Barker's office, Hellraiser Anthology Volume II is coming out really soon, and they sent out review copies for, you know, so we've gotten a chance to take a quick look at it. It was only, I think, 2 days ago that it came out. So I don't want to spoil anything about it, but I do want to say for me personally, I loved the first story the most.
Yeah.
I don't know what did you guys think of that first one?
Do you want to go, David?
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious in that it's kind of a like a blue collar mundane look at hell.
Yeah, and it adds some stuff to the mythology that I thought was kind of neat too. I mean, there were these giants walking around in the labyrinth, and
it adds to it, but it also kind of takes away in that the story, because the narrator is so bored with his job and kind of nihilistic that even the bigger reveals that you get that add to the mythology are also kind of nihilistic towards the end too, which kind of made me chuckle a little bit.
I like the first story a lot too. I mean, to be honest, and totally off the cuff, because I read this last night. I read some stories and I read some before we started the episode, and I liked it better. From what I saw, I liked it better than the first one, to be honest. And yeah, I like the first one a lot. I like this one even better. I think they're really honing their storytelling skills, and they're really finding some good artists to join the fold. Yeah.
One thing about that I wanted to kind of bring up too is that we didn't see the level of goofy pinup art at the end. Like they were a lot more serious.
Mm-hmm. Sure, I love the pinups at the end.
Yeah. I would say that my favorite of the stories, though, which I thought was surprising, because in the first anthology, I liked some of the one-page ones, but I didn't love any of them. I thought some of the bigger stories were kind of the better ones in the first volume. But with this one, the Ancient one was my absolute favorite.
Oh, yeah,
and it's just a quick little poem, and then a piece of art that Clive Barker did that I think it was Riley Schmitz did, coloring and accent work on the artwork, and it's powerful. I loved that one.
I didn't realize that was colored over Clive Barker artwork. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like I guess if you were going to describe it, I mean in audio it's kind of hard, but it looked like what the spirit of Pinhead would look like free of the human element.
Yeah.
That's really amazing, because I remember back in the old comics from Marvel, Pinhead was supposed to be the embodiment of this entity called Zyptotec, which who was a Mayan or Aztec god. I'm sorry, it doesn't occur to me right now, but it means the flayed one, apparently. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting.
And I think it was hinted at too in Scarlet Gospels, right?
I think so. I think you're absolutely right. Yes. And I just think the illustration that you were talking about for the Ancient One is really, really impressive. And I missed that detail too, that it was colored in Clive Barker art, because it's just digitally colored in, and it looks so amazing. It looks real. It looks like 3D, like a photo. It looks like a photo. So it's really, really amazing.
And the Nicholas Vince origin story for the Chatterer, I think we can confirm now that it's not look-see. It's an origin story that's a little different, and I think it's sort of a going back and saying, okay, what would the origin story be of this character if it was the kid that we saw in Hellraiser 2?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it kind of marries it in with the movie series a little more closely.
Yeah.
So that's good, I guess. It makes it more cohesive, because in the old story that he wrote, the Chattering Cenobites was a former comedian, right? From the 20s or something, the Depression era.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So not that it was a bad story. I love that story. It's even a little meta, because he mentions that story mentions Clive Barker saying that, he took our story, he took my story and made a movie, and now I want to tell Clive Barker that the Cenobites are coming to get you, and that's a cute tongue-in-cheek kind of thing in that original look-see story. But this one is not that. And I think now that Nicholas Vince has honed his writing skills a little more with writing all those anthologies of short stories, so this one is more rewarding, I feel. It's not as short as the other one was.
Yeah, that's true.
But I really enjoyed for people who want to see an expansion of the mythology of Hellraiser, the first story does that a lot.
Yeah.
And adds a lot of hierarchy to hell, and not that didn't happen with the Marvel Hellraiser comics. It did. We had 20-something issues, including like the creation of the Harrowers and a spin-off series for Pinhead and all that. But this one actually, it's a reinvention, and I think it's a more serious, in some ways, expansion of the mythology. Even though, like you said, there's those little guys that go around maintaining hell can be pretty funny.
Yeah.
the janitors of hell.
Yes. Don't ask me.
It reminded me of a movie that I don't think a lot of people remember, but I think it was produced by Quentin Tarantino called Curdled. Have you guys ever seen that movie?
No.
It's about a cleanup crew. It's about this bored 20-something-year-old woman whose job is to clean up crime scenes after the police closes them, and she has to clean the blood.
Oh.
And
Wow.
Yeah, and then she discovers like a clue hidden under a pool of blood, and it's a good movie, Curdled. I think that's the title.
I'll have to check that out.
Check that out. It's a pretty good movie. So yeah, the artwork is great, good stories, and like you said, the pinups at the end are pretty cool. And you see the thing that happened with the what was that event where they made that new Pinhead makeup?
Oh yes, right. And that happened at a convention there in California, and I can't remember what
Monsterpalooza 2017. Yes.
Yeah, where they took Clive's new design for Pinhead and put it on Christian Francis. And
the new Pinhead, same as the old Pinhead. In a lot of ways. I mean, the recreation of it is very, very close to the original. So, but we've seen these pictures before, posted on Facebook, some of them. But this one goes through a more elaborate and detailed step-by-step appliance of the makeup, and it's really, really impressive.
Yeah.
I thought. So you get a lot of cool pictures at the end.
And there's a sequel story to Pinocchio. So
that's right.
In case people may not know, if you that story continues on also, which is funny.
It's wonderful. I hope they bring Pinocchio. They continue bringing him back because he's such a quirky, funny, cartoony little character.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to the hardcover of this. I want to start collecting those on my shelf.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of good stuff here. A lot of great artists, a lot of returns from the first anthology. So, yes, I do like this. Riley Schmitz, Ben Mears, Matt Murray, all those like guys from the first one, they're back in this. And they're doing great work. And it's work that it's unbound and I hope unstoppable.
Yeah.
It seems that the sort of across all Hellraiser comics that they pretty much keep to this idea that Hellraiser 1 and 2 are things that happened in the comic universe, and the rest of the sequels they kind of don't really talk about or incorporate into the comics.
Well, these things are anthology format does better when it doesn't have to rely too much on continuity or backstories.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and they've established the Labyrinth and Leviathan, and sometimes Kirsty and Frank gets a lot of mention in these stories.
So, do we know when this anthology is going to come up for order?
Believe at a convention, right when they come back from another convention.
Yeah, I think around Halloween or early November, if I remember right.
Okay, that's great. I mean, I'm sure it'll be up for announced at the Clive Barker Facebook page and the realclivebarker.com store.
But it could be. I mean, geez, it could be soon, even sooner, if we're looking at. But they probably do want to debut it at a convention like they have in the past.
I think that what was announced was that it was going to come out in September. So yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, before Halloween for sure.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, if they've got it all put together in the PDF form, then it's probably not long before it'll be printed.
Oh, I found the actual date. It's right here. So Hellraiser Anthology Volume II will debut at Son of Monsterpalooza in Burbank, California on September 15th through the 17th and will be available a week after via realclivebarker.com on September 24th.
That's only 5 days from the recording of this.
Yeah, so it's coming out, and I hope people listen to us talking about it and go and order their copy.
Of course, next up, Clive Barker's Next Testament. Written by Mark Miller. So I guess first of all, what do you guys think of that it's called Clive Barker's Next Testament, but Mark Millar is the author. Does that sort of confuse things a little bit?
Well, I'm going to start. I don't think it did because of one thing. Clive Barker created this character as much as Mark Millar. So I think it's fair that his name is Clive Barker's Next Testament. That's what the original comic book came out as.
And I totally understand the reasoning behind it, but I'm wondering for the general public looking at this, they're like, wait, who wrote this?
Yeah. And I think that it was more confusing when it was the comic book.
Yeah.
But obviously with this book having Clive Barker's introduction, which is quite humorous in certain regards, I think it helps shed light on whose book it is and how the whole story came about, based off of the painting and everything. And so I thought it was quite good.
I made an announcement about this episode that we're going to be talking about Clive Barker's Next Testament, and it's such a limited release. I kind of forgot that there's a lot of people out there, and then it's a Boom Studios comic that went through 12 issues. I kind of forgot that there's a lot of people out there that don't know what this is.
Yeah.
I had some comments that are like, wait, what is that? Well, which one should I get? Should I get the book or the comics? And
well, it depends on the experience you want to get.
Yeah.
The comic book is a much more visual experience, obviously, and in some ways it's a more condensed version of the book, because the book does go through the same general beats as the comic book story does. So for people who pick up this novel but haven't read the comic, I think their experience is going to be maybe a little more rewarding than the people who've read the comic and then the book.
Yeah.
And I'll explain what I'm saying, because the story's already kind of spoiled to you if you've read the comic book before you read the novel.
And I do want to say here that I don't want to... I want to be able to talk about this, so I think we are going to... There probably will be spoilers. If you get a chance, either read the book or read the comics before you go on, listening to this. I think if you've read the books, the book, either the book or the comics, you're not going to really get spoiled. But if you haven't read either, then if you're concerned about spoilers, maybe go pause this and go read one of those two things.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but how did Wick get started? It was like basically a body painting session on some event that Clive was doing, and Mark Millar was one of the canvases, and so he painted Mark Millar, and then they looked at what they had created and they thought, this looks like a character. So they came up with Wick, Master of Colors. And then I guess at some point they'd started throwing out ideas for a novel originally.
Yeah, Mark
which then
wanted
became
to do a novel.
Comic.
And Clive Barker said, why don't you do a comic book instead? So I think it seems to me that probably Mark had the novel in his mind the whole time, and he did the comics, but he was probably still writing the novel at the same time. This doesn't feel to me like the novel was an adaptation of the comics. It feels like they were either developed like simultaneously, or maybe the novel even came first.
Yeah.
Sure.
The comic book certainly feels like almost like a condensed version of what he has here in the book, because there are some slight differences, and there's obviously a lot more added to the book.
Yeah.
So again, like you guys were saying, it's kind of just dependent on, are you someone that enjoys reading comic books more than books?
Yeah. Well, it reminded me of the Fellowship of the Ring, right? Where you've got, in the novel, it took months for them to get where they were going, and then...
it took years. I think that by the time that Gandalf takes the One Ring from the Hobbit until he comes back to give it to Frodo, it's like 14 years go by.
Yeah.
Well,
that's how Tolkien did it.
The trip of the Fellowship, right? That
right.
lasted months in the novel, and in the movie sort of condensed down to what seemed like just a few days.
Right. Because of the restrictions of the medium that the story is being told in, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we have a little bit of that here with this book. Like in the comic, I think that there was a big shortcut because Elspeth and Tristan got on an airplane, and so they got to fly a big part of their trip before Wick crashed all the planes.
Yeah.
Right, there are differences. There are a few differences. Like, for example, this one features like this phone AI called CanCan, which is kind of like a Siri. I think it would be more sophisticated than Siri.
Like an app or something for the phone.
Yeah, it would be like something you can ask a question. It's kind of a MacGuffin, okay? It's kind of like an artifice for them to figure out that they have to get to this library, like if you're familiar with the story. But they only used that a couple of times, really.
I kind of think that it might have been better if there was some clue in Julian's library about that.
Like they did in the comic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Their clue is really the triple Ouroboros, and of course now we're just getting into like details that if you haven't read the book, you're not going to know what we're talking about. But there's the seed. The seed of that idea is there. The seed of the idea of how they discover what they need to do and where they need to go is that they do go in Julian's office and they do see this symbol. But at the time, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a very important thing. And I really don't understand exactly how they see it as relevant in all the other stuff that's just scattered around the paperwork.
Yeah, it's a little bit of just like this sort of feeling like there's this sort of psychic ability, right, that Tristan has that isn't explored a huge amount.
Yeah, he's kind of being pulled in that direction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way. There's actually a hint that the reply that Elspeth gets on her CanCan app about where they should, the information about the triple Ouroboros. At one point, you realize that, they got the answer after Wick stopped all the communications and radio and internet and all that. Yeah. So that came from somewhere that was not CanCan. So that is kind of hinted there. And I'm sorry if this is a spoiler, but
it's hinted, but it's also sort of debatable. I think and they don't explore it and they don't prove it outright. They're like, that could have already been on its way, or and maybe it just was already in the phone.
I really enjoy this book. I like the structure of it. It's like I said, the same beats as the comic book, except some things are a little more explained. They're a little more described. So, which makes sense. You don't have the visual part of the comic book to be able to get it. So, the medium has to put that description in your mind somehow.
There's the Sue Ellen Pugh versus the bear. Right?
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And the king, the survivalist like character that kind of takes them kidnapped. That seemed a little unnecessary in the comic book, and it seemed a little unnecessary in the story.
I know what you mean. But it felt it felt like a really short sidetrack.
Right, and somehow Tristan keeps getting the upper hand on people who have guns pointed at him while he doesn't have anything. Which was something I believe I mentioned when we did the review of the comic book at some point. I was like, how does he keep getting away with it? But then you have to look at the bigger picture and think maybe there is some sort of fate that's driving Elspeth and Tristan into this.
And I almost wish he would have explored that a little bit more and just put a little bit more meaning or emphasis on those moments, because I think they would have had a bigger impact.
And when I woke up early this morning for some god awful reason. I woke up at 5:00 in the morning, so I started flipping through the comics, and I wanted, because I couldn't remember if the king was in the comics or not, so I went back and looked, and in the book it's kind of explained how Tristan and Elspeth get a hold of these guns, to when they escape from him. But in the comics, the guns just seem to sort of fall out of the sky, and they catch them and shoot him right after he killed Sue Ellen.
Right. I didn't go through the comics for this, but I still remember most of it. So I also want to say that the structure of the story is interesting because the third act is really, really short.
Yeah.
And it was short in the comic books, and it's short in this book. And I was approaching the end of the novel, and even though I knew how it's going to end, I was like, oh, okay, we're just down to the last 30 pages that everything's going to wrap up. And so I guess it is jarring. The ending is kind of jarring, but at the same time, I appreciated that it was not that it wasn't like a Deus Ex Machina that would just put everything together the way it was,
Yeah.
So
I almost in both versions, I wish that he would have given Wick more to do in the end. Because it just kind of felt like they had to keep going back to him because he's a pivotal character in the story, but they didn't really have that much planned for him because at that point the big focus was on Tristan and Elspeth.
Also, there's stuff explained about the final battle between Unan and Filt and Wick in the book that I didn't understand in the comic because the comic was all told through pictures.
Yeah,
and there's a city is sinking and is it Unan, I think, is ripping off chunks of his own body, his flesh, and throwing it in the water, and it's turning into these magma pillars to support the city. But going back to the comics, I looked at that, and he had wounds on his body, but I couldn't figure out why. I mean, it doesn't. It looked like. I see. Yeah, I mean, it matches up, but it didn't. It wasn't really explained. Why did he do that? Why did he? Why was he hurt?
I guess they just chalk it up to the fight, which is
that's kind of what
a little more physical than I expected between gods. I didn't expect gods to be like
punching each other,
but
like Street Fighter.
Yeah. Hadouken. So yeah, I really enjoyed the story. I just thought that sometimes the emotional roller coasters that it took us in kind of had this abrupt ending sometimes, and the situation just achieves resolution really quickly, and then it's just moving on to the next thing that's going to happen. And in that sense, I think sometimes it felt like the beats were falling in place in the right spot, but the transition between some of the beats was a little jarring for me.
In the comic, you mean? Versus
in the novel, in both of them.
Okay.
Yeah, in both of them, I felt like it seemed like, okay, they're going to go through this quest or this adventure. They have to go through like 4 states or whatever, and it's like they're going to find these people, and then they're going to find that people, and then they're going to reach their destination. And I don't know. I just thought some of the transitions between one beat and the next were just basically them driving through nothing.
Yeah, quite literally.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Right. So, and there are parts of it that I think are very humorous. Like when someone says, and I brought this up during the comic review, but when someone says, like, who do you want me to kill? And he says, freaking Midwest, man. And it's like, okay, so Wick kind of dissolves the Midwest into nothingness, and I'm just like, well, how did he know where to stop? And that's kind of an abstract notion that he would be able to circumvent like this whole area and say, well, this is the Midwest.
Especially considering he didn't know what San Francisco was or any of the other places that they were going to. Las Vegas.
At times Wick seems like he knows very little about our world, but then sometimes it seems like he knows a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's just
he could maybe be pulling stuff out of their minds. But I don't know that guy would know exact boundaries of what is the Midwest and what isn't.
Yeah.
Also, there's a thing that I thought was weird, and I'll be quick. It was just that one time he turns the sun into a second moon, and so everything is in darkness, but things are still, working out in terms of thermodynamics, I guess. Like the Earth isn't chilling away into a glacial age, but then there's a point where he flies into the sun, and it says it's a big yellow ball of fire, and then it's still dark on Earth, and then I'm wondering just how does that happen? Like he flies into the sun, and it's still a star, but then he says, like for most of the book before that he had turned the sun into a moon. So I'm just wondering what goes on here. It's like the Earth is circular, it's closed away from the rest of the universe, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe it was like a curtain that he put around the Earth to make it look like a moon.
Yeah, he put it in the negative zone.
Yeah. So, were you going to say something, David? I'm sorry.
I can't remember what it was, but I do have one other point, is that the one thing that I really enjoyed about this book was that 2 pivotal moments from the comic book that I really enjoyed, I thought were even better in the book, which were was the dinner party and the plane sequence.
Right.
I just felt like Mark Miller's timing and his description and his writing was way more visual to me than than what was presented in the comic book. And obviously it's a lot more detailed because it's a novel versus a comic, but I thought both of those were just enhanced by the written word.
I like the wit that he used in the party scene, the dinner party scene.
Mm-hmm.
I like that he conveyed Tristan's experience of dinner parties, his distaste for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the wit of the unveiling of Wick and how he went through the room talking to every single person who was supposed to be a person of power. And he's just basically like putting them in their place, and just exposing their deepest, underbelly. And he's just totally like, if a god, a deity would come to Earth and he had this like chaotic neutral alignment, I guess he would just not care about any social constructs. He would just go around doing whatever he wanted. And in that, it's kind of hard to see him as the God of the Old Testament, though, because he's just like this big attention deficit disorder deity that just as soon as he does something, he's already bored of it. Well, and it makes it inevitable that he would have to be put away at some point.
And something that happened with the dinner party, going back to that, that wasn't really explained too well in the comics, that he just walks over and blows up this lady's head like, oh, you want to see a miracle? And but in the novel, it's because she was disrespectful to him, in his mind.
There was a build-up.
Yeah, there was a build-up to it because she kept calling him Mr. Wick. It's like, how dare you call me Mr., and that he kept getting angrier and angrier and angrier, and then until finally that's it.
I remember what I was going to say about the when we were talking about his perceived intellect and sometimes lack thereof, or at least knowledge of locations, the Midwest and everything. I do remember there were moments in the book where Julian wasn't sure if he didn't know or was just playing with him. So maybe that could have been part of that.
Oh yeah, right. And he does even say in the comics, I think he says, I was lying to you, because in the comics Julian says like, I thought you told me your power was limited, and he said, I lied.
Yeah, but another thing is I wanted to bring up that in this novel. And I'm not gonna make any comparisons here or draw too many connections to Clive Barker's work, because this is Mark Miller's own novel, so it deserves to be analyzed on its own writing. Mm-hmm. But I really like the dialogue. I like the dialogue throughout the book. I thought it was interesting, even though he described Tristan as this character that I didn't really like that much, but I could see that there was a kind of a redeeming arc to Tristan, because he's kind of like this wild, rich kid, and at first he seems to be very nihilistic, and he seems to share a bit of his dad's elitism, I want to say.
And he saw women as a conquest.
Right, until he meets Elspeth.
Yeah, up until Elspeth, exactly.
And love redeems all. That's usually how it goes. And Elspeth is this almost like saintly figure. She's just all into all the charities and being vegetarian and all that stuff. And it's she's like the force of good that kind of pulls him towards empathy and understanding himself a little more deeply, and his relationship with the world and his dad and all that. So. But it was interesting, this thing that you mentioned it before, Ryan, the kind of the psychic bond between Julian and Tristan. I think in the comic book it was kind of hinted a bit, but in this one it's made more clear, I believe. It's also
a lot of the story is told from Tristan's perspective, and you get a lot of his thoughts about, like, okay, I'm so, like the chicken Waffle House, incident. And and he's thinking like, oh, I can't believe I got Elspeth into this situation. I'm gonna figure out a way to get out of this. Okay, it looks like it's now or never. I'm gonna have to do something, and then Elspeth shoots that guy in the neck, and it was kind of like there was a lot of his perspective being like, oh, I'm the big strong man. I'm the one that's got to do something, and then Elspeth somehow comes out, and even though we don't really know her perspective at all because nothing is told from her perspective. But she comes out and ends up being the strong one a lot of the time. Not all the time.
That's one of the moments where I thought I could use a little more description on that scene on what happens. Because she's described as walking in front of the sheriff towards the stage. And then all of a sudden Tristan is looking at the people, and when he hears a shot, and then he goes back and she's got the sheriff's gun and she shot him. Yeah. And how did that happen? How did she get his gun? I guess it just happened, and I wish I had a little more, like other moments where it seems like the action cuts like it was a movie and then moves to something else and then goes back to the same story that I was talking about before. This happens in San Francisco when Wick is asking people in Union Square saying, hey, it's Q&A time. Ask me a question. And then some people are asking some questions. It's kind of being dismissive. And then this deaf guy or deaf and mute guy says something to his wife, and his wife says, my husband wants to know, can you tell a lie? Do you lie? And then he goes like, oh, that's an excellent question. It's like, if this was a contest, you'd be winning. Yeah. But then it cuts to something else, and when it goes back on the next chapter to that, it just shows the deaf guy and his wife leaving, and it doesn't tell us what his answer was. Was that just his answer saying that, oh yeah, that's a great question? And it's like, I'm not going to answer. Yeah. So I wanted to know the answer to that question. I guess. Yeah. So he never really gives it to us in the mind's eye of the story. So I thought that was very cinematic in that sense, but I wanted to know more.
I think this is kind of on me, but I also thought that the in the comics that the blue one was a female, and I think it's maybe because I didn't pay close enough attention, but it's really clear in the novel that all three of these gods are male. They're brothers. Right.
It's the Son, the Holy Ghost, and then there's Wick, who would be the god. So but it is a miracle that he had enough attention span to create a universe in 12 billion years when he would get bored in just a matter of hours.
Well, do we know for a fact that he was the one that did it, or did all three of them, build the world together?
I think all three of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then they had to lock him away.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the chaotic neutral. He's like a Joker character.
Yeah.
If Joker was a god, or
Or Dungeons and Dragons character.
Right. Yeah. But a very cool novel to read for sure. I mean, it read really quickly for me, and I'm going to make a confession. I read most of this book in like a couple of days.
Yeah.
Yeah. It starts out a little slow, but it's because for me, I kept on looking for the differences. And there weren't as many in the beginning, but as you go along, you start seeing the differences between the comic and the novel. And I think the book, for me, started out reading a little slow, but it picked up and got faster and faster and more exciting towards the end.
In the introduction written by Clive Barker, he says something here near the end that I think kind of is a good summation of what the Mark Miller wanted to do with this book, which is, he says, Wick is a monster, plainly evil. That's why the tale we're telling here is of gods that must fall, so that we may know them as the fictions they are and go on our way unburdened by absolutes. So I really love the way he ends his introduction there, because that's really what this is about. It's the idea of God coming back to his creation to live inside it doesn't make a lot of sense, because we wouldn't be able to connect to him in the way that he wants and still be creatures with free will, right? Most of what Wick wants is to be worshipped, whether people want to or not.
Yeah, and they don't do a good enough job for him.
And once you do that, you diminish the world to a puppet show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? It's no longer people making their own decisions. It's no longer humans doing their best to understand the universe. It just becomes a puppet show. And I think that really shows in this scene that happens in Paris, where he appears in the Eiffel Tower and he tells people that, oh, hey, I fought the devil and I saved you. That's what all this stuff has been going on here. He's obviously lying to them, which I guess kind of answers the question that guy asked. I mean, yes, he does lie. I mean, he takes advantage of the fact that when he was God on Earth 2,000 years ago, that there was no quick word of mouth that would travel through continents immediately like we have now. So that's one of the reasons why he disrupts all communication in the planet, is so that he can have people take him at face value at what he says. Because once you disconnect someone from the internet, you're disconnecting them from the voice of the world, the global village, right? It's, in some ways, for some people, that's kind of what, I don't want to say religion, but a lot of people, when they don't know something, they just go on the internet, and it's kind of become our little, our little superpower. It's like you can talk to anybody just by, anywhere in the world, just by sending them a text. So in that sense, we are now, we could, the internet is kind of this place where we can play at being omniscient and present in everywhere, right? Like a god.
Well, and there's parallels to governments that censor information, so that they can control what people think and what people know.
Sure. I mean, excellent point.
Yeah.
So yeah, this god is a god that needed to be taken out, and I think this book does a good job of telling us what a unhinged god would do.
Yeah.
But unhinged people do when they get power is they don't do good things.
and I love this sort of Clive Barker and Neil Gaiman idea that gods of the imagination, are real. That things that we create with our minds are real.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, you guys have seen American Gods?
No, I've read the book, but I haven't seen the show.
Yeah, exactly. I've read the book also, but I want to see the show. I just don't have cable TV, so I got to wait for it some other way to get it.
That's one of the principles of magic, I mean, I know some people who practice magic and they're into that and into chaos magic and all that stuff. They read a lot of Alan Moore. They read a lot of Grant Morrison, chaos magician. And so they understand that language is a big part of magic, and the way, like when you say, oh, she cast a spell on something. A spell literally means to spell out something, to try to use language as a tool to reshape your vision of the world. And if you believe in something, then you can try to materialize that belief into action.
Yeah.
And so, I really don't know where I was going with this, but it's just something I wanted to mention.
Well, and just this Jungian sort of collective unconscious idea that or like the Force in Star Wars, that's a real thing that can create these deities, that sort of a loop of,
and the idea that
something makes it real, like Candyman.
Yeah, and I like that this book dabbles with the idea that even someone who's allegedly incorruptible, it's not that they're corrupted by power. It's just that the way they wield power would have tremendous consequences for their creation, for us. Because if they don't like something and they just want that thing gone, it would just disappear.
Right, and Wick obviously has no respect for human life.
Right.
Yeah, even though he created them. And that was another interesting part of the novel, I guess we didn't really talk too much about, is that these three gods created people to be sort of like them. And Wick is angry that they're like him, right? I mean, even though he made them the way they are, and they have the same flaws that he has, he doesn't like that. He wants he doesn't want them to be arrogant. He wants them to be supplicants to him.
He starts changing things right away, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I mean, that's why every artist has to at some point give up his creation, because I think it was Oscar Wilde that said that no work is ever finished, just abandoned.
Yeah.
And And the way the artist removes himself from the art, I think at some point becomes a necessity so the art can stand on its own. Because if the artist keeps messing with his creation, then it's never finished. It's just always going to be a work in progress, and it's going to be changing and being altered, and things are going to disappear and other things are going to show up. And like I said, for a universe like us, a creator that would be present here demanding worship would just turn everything into a puppet show. And that's why they had to fall.
Did you guys get the impression from reading the comics, before the novel, that Filt sort of unwove Wick and Unan together and like disintegrated both of them and sort of spread them out all over the world? I didn't realize that until the book. I thought it was only Wick that he did that to.
Yeah.
I did get that idea, and I'm just not sure if that wasn't part of the process necessary to destroy Wick. But then these are deities; they're never going to disappear. Even Wick doesn't really disappear, right? He's just turned into these. He's turned into this shower of particles or molecules that are scattered in the wind, so become part of the wind.
Well, and I think Unan is like that too, right? I think he's also scattered all over the world.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't want to draw parallels with Clive Barker's work, but there's the inevitable connection to Clive Barker. So I just wanted to say, Mamoulian Damnation Game, he's also turned into little chunks that don't die.
Yes, right.
Turned into. Chopped into minced meat, and still the minced meat is just out there. It's never destroyed. Nothing's ever destroyed.
Which is also the nightmare that in Dread, right? In the short story Dread, the nightmare that oh God, what is his name? That he has that Quaid has, right? That the clown with the axe keeps chopping him, and for some reason he never dies.
Oh yeah, that was pain without hope of healing.
Yeah.
It was life long before the body wanted it to cease. I used to know all that stuff by heart. Really, it's beautiful. But yeah, I guess the book ends on this note of serious change and transformation.
Yeah.
Not sure if there's a lot of redemption into it, just because the place that the comic book and the book leave us is a place where damage was done. Things changed. Mm-hmm. But I think they put symbolically hope on the shoulders of the new generation that's going to come. They're going to live into a different world, a world where people now know that gods are real. So I would like to see how that is going to change the world after this.
Were you guys dreading, all this getting to know Sue Ellen Pugh? Because we're in a weird position, having... People who read this book are in a weird position having read the comics, that it's like what's going to happen to her, but we spend a long time in this novel getting to know her, and yes, she used to be religious and really naive, but she wants to expand her horizons and travel the world and stuff like that, and she's really helpful and benevolent and she, in the comics, she's really kind of more annoying, but
right.
But in this novel, she's really kind of
sympathetic.
Yeah.
There's more redeeming qualities to her in the novel.
Yeah.
Sure, I think it's completely obviously completely deliberate, so we can connect with the character a bit more and
but it's rough when you know what's going to happen to her from the start. It's like, all right, stop making me like her, because
right. That's what I was saying at the beginning of the discussion. If you've seen the comic books, it's kind of spoils the story for you, because it does follow the same beats as the comic.
Yeah.
So
all the new things that are added in are more character based, or some slight plot changes, but it doesn't bring anything really drastic to it, which is kind of the biggest disappointment of it, that there wasn't some new revelation to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. It expanded on some things, and you understood a little better what was going on. I think some parts of the comics were only told through pictures, which I'm not super visual person. I'm more auditory, but But yeah, I still like it a lot. I appreciate it better than the comics. I don't think of it as an adaptation of the comics, and I meant to actually ask over at Seraphim, what was the timeline of the creation of this novel, because I'm pretty sure just from reading this that it was probably developed either before or in the middle during the comics.
Yeah.
And not after. I don't think it's an adaptation of the comics.
Well, we're in a position where we can ask that.
I know. I wanted to do that, and I meant to, but then I got roped. I just got myself sort of sucked into, flipping through the comics this morning instead of doing
right. But I'm sure you can try to find that out, and that would be great to feature about that work.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could even have him come on and talk to us a little about it, because I think that's really interesting. I also think that this book deserves a much wider release than what it has. So I'd like to see this on an ebook or paperback. Ebook might be, ebook is easier, and maybe more what would happen. I think that's kind of today's paperback in some ways.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say that the Kindle seems to be today's mass market paperback.
Yeah.
It seems to have taken that role because you can make as many copies as you want. So
yeah, and maybe they will when these sell out. The last I checked, the book wasn't sold out yet on Earthling's website.
I'm looking at the page at Earthling Pub, and it still says buy a copy for the gift edition and the deluxe edition.
Yeah.
As for the lettered edition, it just says inquire about a lettered edition.
Yeah. So I think there we go. So it is still available, in all editions, and I think that maybe when it is sold out, they'll hopefully put it in other editions like audiobook and ebook.
Oh wow, an audiobook would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had 350 gift copies, 100 deluxe copies, and 15 letter copies produced. And you can still probably get one of these. I got copy 29, and beautiful book. I love the cover. The dust jacket of it has this beautiful Clive Barker image of Wick.
Yeah, and it's in color. And is it signed by Mark Miller? Does it say the MM next to his face there?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine is copy number 9.
Oh, nice. I have 94.
All right. And, it was violent. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was a crazy ride throughout this story. And, again, if you're a fan of the comic book, this is just going to make you fall more in love with the story, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
I think Tristan and Elspeth especially Tristan was more of like an everyman in the comic. But I think he has a real distinct personality in the novel that we didn't quite get so much in the comics.
Right. And the opening of this book, I think, is very powerful. It was good in the comic book, but I think here the opening of Julian Desmond, the way that he discovers Wick, I really had a good time going through that, and it almost transported me a little bit into this impression of reading about the empty quarter in the Weave World.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I like the opening, a very strong opening, very strong character, and I just had a blast.
And speaking of that, I guess I was just thinking of this, too, as I was flipping through the comics. That female character that Wick, empties her mind and turns her into a sort of a vegetable.
Yes.
In the comics, I got the feeling that she was sort of that she was married to Julian and that she was like a stepmom for Tristan.
Yeah.
But in the novel, it seemed more like she was just somebody that came along that was sleeping with Julian.
Yeah, like an assistant with benefits, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I got. That's what I got out of it too. Yeah, I think that was a character that was slightly changed.
Yeah.
So yeah. I just want to know one thing: how did they know how to navigate through the country after everything had been erased in the Midwest?
Yeah, exactly. I think they just kept.
Just keep going.
Yeah, right.
I guess you could go by the sun or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool stuff. get it, because if you can get a copy. Mark Miller, it's not the first time he's writing stuff. I mean, he's been a writer ever since he wrote for the OC Weekly newsletter, and he wrote for Hellraiser comic books. He wrote for Hellraiser Bestiary anthology, Hellraiser Anthology. So he's no stranger to writing.
Well, and he's writing comics that aren't Clive Barker related too, like Steam Man, and I think there are some others.
Right, exactly, yeah. So if you want to get into that, it's Mark Miller with an E. Don't go for Mark Miller with an A, because that's another comic book writer.
Yeah, that happens all the time on Twitter. People are confusing him for that Mark Miller.
Yeah, so I liked it. Great book. It's just more of the same story that you have in the comic book. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good job, Mark.
Yeah.
Liked it.
Yep. Yeah, I thought it was very good. I would recommend that people read this before the comic book. I would say get the book first.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunately it's a little hard to do it that way because the comic is really easy to find.
Yeah, very accessible. Yeah.
And I think there's even like collected books of Next Testament comic.
Yeah.
God has returned. Yeah. God help us all.
Yeah. And it was called Next Genesis or New Genesis, I think.
New Genesis. Yeah. That's something that was interesting. When they were announcing it, I remember seeing the cover of the issue #1 had a different title in the same font. It was supposed to be New Genesis, but then it turns out that DC already had the trademark for that with their Jack Kirby New Genesis universe.
Yeah.
So that's why they changed it to Next Testament.
Honestly, New Genesis makes more sense for the storyline than Next Testament, because a testament is a written work, right? And there's no
witness. There's a hint that at some point Julian believes that he might become the writer of this New Testament for Wick.
Until
the one who will say the story.
Yeah, until he gets pulverized.
Until he gets, yeah. So I loved it. It's great. I love the way that a god could change reality at his whim, and just make a whole bunch of people disappear and then just make them appear again. It's like,
and this is a gorgeous release, but it's so super limited. There's not even 500 copies. That I really hope that we get more of a mass market version of it for everybody. And we're talking about this to more people that can physically buy the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Earthling always does good releases. The hardcover is beautiful. It's very well done. Mm-hmm. Great quality. I only wish that the paper inside would have been a better paper, because it's that kind of like it's not a paperback. It's kind of like paperback pages though. But yeah, I mean, I've seen that white paper that you usually get. I believe you call it couché paper. That the more bright white paper, I think, would probably age better than this sort of paper, which seems like it might get yellow a little bit with time. But hey, it's Earthling, independent publishers. They're doing the best they can, and I'm sure their lettered edition is going to be really luxurious.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess now that's done, we can news on the site. We have a Discord chat. So, and I've actually had a pretty good chat with somebody on there already. So people, it's on the upper right of our blog. You can just click the link there and get into it if you like Discord. I know it's mostly used for gaming, but I kind of appreciate it for the community and discussion without the distractions of Facebook. Where we can just kind of talk to each other, and join in. It's still early. We don't have very many people on there, so come talk to us there,
or leave us a message, or leave us some feedback. You can also use the little tab that says "Call us on Skype." If you're visiting the site,
it's just an audio recording.
Right. You can leave us an audio message if you want.
Yeah.
If you're on your phone, go to clivebarkercast.com and it'll pop up a little tab on the side there. I think it's the right side, and you can tap that and leave us an audio message too.
Yeah, and at this moment, all of our podcast episodes are available on YouTube, so this one will be there too, which we took a while, but it's done. Rob did a scene of the week. This was quite a while back, right? What was his last scene of the week? Was it from Lord of Illusions?
Art of Illusions, I think, yes.
Yeah, I think it was the Taste the Darkness D'Amour one.
Yeah, the one on Wyckoff Street.
Yeah.
Always great to see those scenes of the week. And, have you checked out our BarkerCast app yet? It's really cool. I made a little video about it, and I'm going to make another video about how you can listen to us on different platforms. So stay tuned for that. And go on the Google Play and look for Clive Barker Podcast, or go on the iTunes store and look for the Clive Barker Podcast there.
And our last podcast episode was, I sort of jokingly named it Occupy Midian on Location, just out of nostalgia. But our friend Jonathan Q went to a Canada screening, not Toronto. Where was that? It's in Canada. Anyway, he went to the Rawhead Rex premiere and talked to fans that were there to watch Rawhead Rex, talked to the people who ran the film festival. So that was kind of neat.
It was Hexploitation Film Festival in Hamilton, Ontario.
There we go, Ontario, not Toronto.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that for us, Jonathan. I've known him for a long time from the old Hellbound Web Forum, and he's done a couple of fan films about Hellraiser. One is Hellraiser Prophecy, and the other one is Hellraiser Prophecy crossover, Dead of Winter, I think.
Winter's Lament.
And Winter's Lament, that's it. So he got us some cool interviews. He talked to some fans. He got the panel, I think, where they talked about the symbolism of some of the film, and he was like, "Oh, okay, well, that was kind of fun to listen to." That he recorded this back in August 25th at the Staircase Cafe Theater. So thank you very much for that. We turned it into an episode, so that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I guess going back to that Cabal Cut, I was starting to put, and here's our feedback that we've had lately, but it was all about the Cabal Cut, and there has been so many comments on the price and the availability and stuff that even Facebook was trying to get me to promote that post. I'm like, oh no, Facebook, I'm not gonna do that just to get more complaints.
Right.
But, yeah.
Well, focus on the positives. Yeah, it's coming out. The content is created for it. The edit is done. So who knows if it'll come out in different editions at some point.
And you've replied this to a lot of people, but it's basically we could have this or we could have nothing.
Right.
So I'm happy about it. I think that if I wasn't a contributor to it, I probably wouldn't have been able to afford it either.
And for 3 years, the Cabal Cut was totally off the chart. Nobody could see a copy of it unless you had downloaded it illegally from the internet.
Right.
And even that kind of went away after a while. I mean, the torrents were dead and stuff. So, again, the director's cut came out, 3 years ago, I think. And now this thing comes up, and it's either this or nothing. So we pick what we want, and we get what we can.
Yeah, and you watch whatever version of Nightbreed you like. One does not replace the other.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
And this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end. Thanks for sticking with us this far. This was a long one. I did get confirmation while I was in the middle of editing that, in fact, the novel of Next Testament was written after the comic series. Not before or during, like I had thought. So... shows what I know. You can find the show notes for this episode as well as lots of news and features at www.clivebarkercast.com. Leave comments there or get them directly into the podcast by clicking the Send Voicemail tab on the right. Please follow us on Twitter at BarkerCast or at Occupy Midian. Like us on Facebook and join the Occupy Midian Facebook group. You can listen on the site or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, TuneIn, Pocket Cast, Google Play, and Double Twist. Look for our apps in the iTunes Store or Google Play Store. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Please take a couple of minutes to leave us a review on iTunes. It means the world to us and helps us spread the word about Clive Barker. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial fan site and podcast that is not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Films. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans.
Thanks for listening.